Welcome and thank you for attending this morning. I'm hoping, against hope, we might just get another one to make us quorum. We're one short, unless we can go and drag somebody in, pretend that's somebody else, I don't know. But we're just one short at the moment, so fingers crossed somebody will make it. Okay, can we take apologies for absence then, please, Lindsay?
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Burrow, and we have Councillor Geffen in attendance on his behalf. Apologies received from Councillor Rainbow, Councillor Sims and Amanda Tomlinson.
Okay. As usual, do we have any declarations of interest to record? No, I'm not seeing any. Okay, thank you for that. And quick chair's remarks really. This is the last but one scrutiny meeting of this municipal year. I can't believe how quickly it has gone, that we nearly at the end of it. And of course we were extremely busy in the summer, so thank you all for your commitment over that busy time. We've got Laura Schoaf, who will come down from 11, and also the new head of law and governance, Helen Edwards. She will come and introduce herself. They're currently in a meeting with the mayor, so sadly they can't make it till then. And I think that's about it. Welcome, Mike.
Sorry I'm late.
That's all right.
Hello, Mike. So fight my way through the vagaries of Penny Bar now.
I know. Been there, done that one.
Welcome to Councillor Bird, who is in attendance as portfolio holder for the 3 housing papers. Thanks for attending, Mike.
Yeah,
Of course you have, of course you have.
You're not going to be able to.
Okay, we can move on then, please. We have a number of minutes to take. You will see that because we weren't quorum at our last meeting, the minutes of the 17th of October and the mayoral Q&A minutes of the 20th of October were presented to the board meeting, the last CA board, and they were agreed. So I'll just pick up those minutes for any matters arising. The mayoral Q&A budget minutes you will have seen in the paperwork, and I'll pick up comments on those when we reach them. So we do need to take the minutes of the 15th of December for accuracy, but I'll take those when we get to them. So if I take matters arising first from the 17th of October, please. Do I have any matters arising on page 1, page 2, 3 and 4? My only matter arising on page 3 is as I said, the TDD work, and Laura will update us on that when she arrives later on today, so we'll pick up that matters arising. Do we have any matters arising on the minutes of the 20th of October on page 5, page 6, 7 and 8? No matters arising there. And if we can take them for accuracy first and then matters arising, the minutes of Thursday, the 15th of December, page 9, page 10 and page 11 for accuracy. And then matters arising, page 9, page 10 and page 11. Okay, so we can take that those were accurate. We can't vote on those again because we're not quorum, so those again will be presented to the board for acceptance. Okay, that will move us on then to agenda item 6, which is the mayor's response to the Q&A, the policy Q&A that we had earlier in the year. The response has been presented, and I've had a chat with Laura Schoaf before the meeting because this is not the format that we would normally expect. We would normally expect a written response in letter form from the mayor, and people who've attended these meetings over previous years will know that that's the format that we normally have. Laura has apologised. These were sent out in error as an administrative error. So we will have within the next week or so a written response from the Mayor. So I can only apologise to you that they've come out in the presentation they have as an officer's response and not the Mayor's response. Any comments from anybody? No? Okay. That takes us then on to agenda item 7 and the future home strategy, which Rob Lamond is going to be presenting. Oh, right. Okay. I'm told we've got We've got Helen Edwards on the screen, who is the new Director of Law and Governance. Welcome, Helen.
Morning, everyone.
Do you just, before we move on to Rob, do you just want to do a brief introduction of yourself?
Can do, yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Helen Edwards, as you say, new Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer. I joined on Monday. Many years' experience as a Director of Legal and Governance and Monitoring Officer, new to Combined Authorities. So looking forward to learning about how the authority works and pleased to meet you all.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure we'll see you at future scrutiny meetings. Thanks very much, Helen. So, Rob, over to yourself on the first paper, Future Home Strategy.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I've got a bit of a croaky voice, so hopefully everybody can hear me today. So item 7 is the update on the Future Home Strategy. This is a strategy that's been developed under the Housing and Land Delivery Board's portfolio. It brings together 2 previously separate strands of work around advancement of construction and different types of development in the region, and then also moves towards zero carbon housing. So accepting that the 2 pieces of work have reached a certain point in its previous development, the 2 strands have been brought together under the Future Home Strategy, and this is an update paper on that development of that strategy. Just in terms of background, as I mentioned, this has been commissioned by the Housing and Land Delivery Board as part of the portfolio's deliverables for this year, and it also fits in and aligns with the West Midlands Plan for Growth document, which was published last year, and other elements of the aims and objectives of the corporate plan and corporate objectives of the Combined Authority. It's also informed by the investment prospectus, which is produced each year in terms of the investment opportunities in the region, and it also helps to build on what currently is being developed by government in terms of a future home standard and the region's ambition to start to deliver those standards ahead of time. So in terms of the development of the strategy itself, a Future Homes Task Force has been set up, which is led by industry members and representatives from across different parts of the construction industry, skills, and also local authorities are represented on that task force. And it's chaired by Mark Farmer, who's as well as being within the industry, is also a government advisor on modern methods of construction. That task force, along with other task forces, have been established really to kind of help us understand where the sector is moving to, where we can be ahead of the curve on certain trends, and also to understand the impact across the construction industry of developing trends. The task force has met 3 times during 2022, and we're now into the context and research phase of developing the strategy. So under section 3 of the report, it notes the 2 key research pieces that are being developed. One is to map the existing supply chain capacity within the region for advanced manufacturing construction and what's also known as modern methods of construction. That appendix 1 to this report today sets out some of the capacity, capability and ambition in the region to deliver more. And then the second part of work is really looking at the emerging carbon and sustainability standards. So as it currently stands, there is no specific definitive carbon standard for delivery of homes. However, the government is currently working up the national legislation for future home standard, and we are looking with the task force at how we can help to work towards that zero carbon target at a time. That's also being informed by understanding of other advocacy from industry, such as the Royal Institute of British Architects, and also the other policy positions from Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Greater London Authority, and other leaders in this field. So in terms of the scope of the strategy, we're very keen to provide both a strategic document that sets out the intent, ambition and expectations of the region, That will be provided to Housing and Land Delivery Board in this quarter of this financial year. We're also working on an intended technical standard which will be provided to applicants to our funding to understand what kind of technical specifications we're looking to include within our ambitions, and so that we can help to drive that delivery in the future. And we're also going to work on guidance and context for not just developers, but also working with local authorities and other actors in the region to make sure that we're all working to the same kinds of understandings of different technical specifications. At the moment, there is quite a range of technical spec and different types of applications of this. So our ambition is to work to one kind of overall blueprint. However, that's not to say it's going to be prescriptive. So we're looking to be as broad as we possibly can be to help to develop new products and new delivery. So the technical standard is currently being developed, and in section 5 of the report it goes into a bit of detail in terms of the intent of that. But also I think it's important for overview and scrutiny in terms of previous conversations at this committee. That will then give us a much better steer in terms of the types of data we can collect in the future to understand that we're moving these targets, because there's such a broad range of application of these types of these standards at the moment. It's very difficult to come back to committee with specific numbers of the things that are being developed and delivered in the region. We can give broad benchmarks, but not necessarily specific numbers. So that will help us to do that in the future. So that's the overall context of the report, Chair, and happy to answer questions.
Councillor Bird, is there anything you want to add into that?
That's quite a comprehensive report, Madam Chairman. I think that just concentrating on the fact that we are now trying to impress on people that modern methods of construction are far better for efficiency and, of course, speed. So, yes, Rob is quite right in saying that's where our focus lies. I won't be happy until we get somebody in the West Midlands doing it here rather than further abroad and in other parts of the country. Rob knows that's one of my pet things, to try and get a factory that's doing this. So it's on our doorstep, which cuts down, of course, on carbon because of the transport costs. So I think that we have been very successful in the Housing and Land Board in meeting government targets. But, you know, obviously this is a new strategy going forward, and I'm happy to assist in any way I can.
Thanks. I'd thought that Green Square Accord were one of the local manufacturers who were providing locally. Do we have any others within the region who are providing for us?
I'm not aware of it. I have to say I was instrumental in Green Square Accord actually starting that business some years ago. Myself and my colleague, Deputy Councillor Andrew, we gave them a piece of land in the Beechdale, which is an old school. And from there on, they've grown to a huge manufacturing base in Aldrich, which not only supplies the local firms. It's disappointing, I should say, that Walsall Housing Group, which is one of our largest housing providers, don't buy from Green Square Accord, even though they're literally a mile down the road. Why that is, I don't know. But certainly Green Square Accord are very big in the industry. I'm not aware. I think there's one in Leamington and the one in Coventry, I think. But certainly we did have, remind me, Rob, the people who we did Icknall Port.
That was Urban Splash.
Yeah, Urban Splash were moving into this field. I don't know whether they've actually succeeded in doing that, but they were looking to do that. But I think with the Black Country plan now down the drain, we've got to try and attract somebody towards the West Midlands so we can actually take the credit for it.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Mike. And just before I bring Martin in, when we'd had our briefing, Rob, I'd asked for some figures. Was it? And I know you said that data was difficult to collect on how many modulars had actually been delivered in the West Midlands. Were you able to get any data for us?
I've got a few updates on that, Chair, and then just to say on the appendix to this report, there's a few different categories here, so it's a little bit kind of murky. But on page 31, supply chain category 2. That includes locale homes, which is the Green Square Accord manufacturer you mentioned. There's some other companies listed there that do different elements of off-site development as well. So it's not that they're all doing everything in the sector, but they are doing some of those things, and they're all located within the West Midlands. In terms of numbers, from our route map that we developed for advanced manufacturing construction 12 months, 18 months ago, was noted there was current capacity to deliver around 4,500 new homes per year through the West Midlands supply chain. However, at that point, there was a delivery of circa 2,000 to 2,500 homes per year. And some of that is purely around building the kind of critical mass of supply chain delivery. So how does the sector go from quite a small element of the overall delivery and construction to longer term and bigger success? And a lot of that is building the order book, which is also part of the strategy.
Councillor McCarthy.
Right. Have you, to some extent, looked at the parallels in the motor industry where we had Nissan, Toyota, Honda, who brought a well-designed article, and they brought a bin of components with them, including all the supply chain management that's already been developed. But there has been quite a lot of integration with the local authorities, and the government have provided some of the funding for this, which is a bit of a parallel also. And one of the things that we've set is minimum percentages for local supplied content for the sub-supplied bits and pieces. Otherwise, we'll end up with huge amounts of sub-supplied, like bathroom assemblies coming straight from China on ships. There's a whole load of stuff that goes alongside this, and be interested to see if it's been considered, because most of these lessons have already been learned.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, certainly in terms of the relevance and link to the automotive industry and others, that's certainly something that's been looked at both by ourselves, but also by the sector leaders. So how can they learn those lessons and also apply some of that kind of end-to-end delivery production. In terms of the supply chain and using local suppliers, there is a criteria within our Housing and Land Development funds in terms of developers looking to do that currently, and that is within the criteria of our funding programs. But it's certainly something that I think this supply chain analysis that's been done shows there is much broader scope to align the different elements of manufacture that are possible in a modular or advanced manufacturing program, aligning those with delivery of actual developers as well. So how do we encourage those links between the suppliers and the end deliverers as well, and how do we build that into the strategy? So point taken, Councillor, we're definitely looking at.
If I could just come back to slightly, how are we going to choose the lead construction contractor, the person that chooses the first tier system integrators for the various modules that make this thing up?
So to reach out, that wouldn't necessarily be for us to choose. That would be the developer of the program of the site that would be choosing that. What we could do is work with them to understand what the opportunities are within the region, but we wouldn't be making that decision.
And mainly just perhaps mandate things like the percentage of local content and the growth of local content from initial design, which the first so many thousand units may have something from an existing supply chain where the local supplier has developed to supply something of that standard.
Yeah, agreed. And again, we have a number of criteria within the program that we currently run, and that's something we're very keen to establish. But also, we're very keen not to overly over specify some of the criteria across the program. So it's definitely worth us looking at how do we include that whilst not making it something that will preclude development in the future.
But I think if you set a simple thing like this percentage locally manufactured target, it'll be a key given in the sourcing process, and it should drive forward against time.
Agree, and also that there are also similar kind of criteria within the planning agreements as well. So that's something that we can look in terms of working with local authorities to understand that we're not contravening local planning regulations, but we're also working with them on that basis.
Councillor Bird.
Just on that point, Madam Chairman, if I may, if you mentioned earlier Green Square Accord, in actual fact, they're mainly timber frame, but their timber comes from Norway because the quality of timber is not available in the UK. Now, that's something obviously comes from trees. We all know that. What I think would benefit this committee is if you wished, we could probably arrange a tour around Green Square Accord, which is in Aldridge, and I think you will be quite surprised because they're capitalising on the model that's been used by McDonald's for many years, that McDonald's have their restaurants delivered on the back of a lorry. in pods, and they're made in Scotland. And then they bolt them all together and then surround them with brick slips. So the reason I know that is to supply the brick slips. But they can build a McDonald's restaurant from scratch once the pad is cast, a concrete pad, within weeks. And as a result, they're now using that kind of technology in Green Square Accord by having bathrooms, kitchens delivered in pod form, so they could just be bolted inside the timber frame building when it's erected.
Yeah, and I think I'd certainly be interested in taking you up on the offer to go and have a look. So I'll leave that with Lindy to organise something. Thank you. Councillor Lumby.
Yes, I know regarding the technical standard that it should be aligned and built on emerging standards. So haven't you got a risk that you'll set your standards too high and that developers would rather than build elsewhere rather than on our sites where we want the housing?
That's a very key point in terms of the development of this strategy, councillor. So we're very much looking to understand, working with the sector itself on the progress they're already making towards these standards, because they know they're coming in the future. So that in terms of their longer term delivery, supply chain and business plans, they're already working towards these standards. And our view is how can we get to that before the standards are official legislation. Obviously, then they learn the lessons before and get ahead of the market in terms of that. I appreciate the fact that, as you say, there is a potential risk there around not necessarily attracting developers in who might be looking to do things elsewhere, but we're balancing that very much with the expectation and the understanding of the market that this is coming in anyway. So how do we get ahead there and start to make the difference already?
Yeah, Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see that the stakeholders in the regions are ahead in the game when it comes to tackle climate change or bring the carbon emission to zero. I would like to know what there is something which bothering me for quite a long time: the amount of water we waste in our houses. For example, when we shower, kitchen sink water goes to drain, and I think that water can be recycled. For example, the shower water can be brought back to the toilet and flush the toilet to save the water, because the water is a precious thing in the world, and there is a lot of shortage. We've seen the shortage here in our country in the summer. There is something we can do to recycle that water, for example, the shower water or the sink water in the new home strategy? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't claim to know exactly how that might work, but I think it's certainly something we should be looking at in terms of the overall water recycling and water retention basis, Councillor. I think there's certainly, based on some examples of schemes that are already happening in the region, there's a lot of understanding and data that can be drawn from modern developed homes that gives you that information in terms of how much, using the example of heating, how much heating savings are being made in terms of the household in the heat already, so not having to keep heating the house up, how much water is used per day. There's a lot of opportunity there to have recording of that type of information at a house level, which obviously gives you much more practical data. But obviously that's in very small examples at the moment, and will continue to develop in the future. But if it's okay with you, Chair, I might take the question back about that specifics around water recycling and come back to the committee in the future.
Yeah. Councillor Bird.
Along those lines, there's certainly well-advanced technology that does heat recovery. So therefore, heat from the kitchen can be taken, it's extracted and recirculated within the house. I have to say, in the Green Square Accord properties they built in Warsaw, the first ones, I was absolutely shocked when I said to the lady, what's the running costs of the house? And she said something startled me. I think she said about £14 a week. You know, and I'm thinking, what? You know, that was so low. And of course, with energy prices the way they are now, I think insulation and heat recovery is probably more beneficial to a householder than water. But I do take on board that's also a cost.
Thanks. I'd just like to explore the relationships with local authorities a little bit, and how we can encourage local authorities to be, you know, switched on to the opportunities here. Dudley has just done its consultation on design standards, or it's opened its consultation on design standards, should I say. And I understand that colleagues that the briefing members had didn't actually include anything to do with the opportunities around alternative methods of construction, which disappoints me somewhat. So how can we ensure that local authorities are switched on at an early stage to the opportunities that there are there for speed, for good quality housing, for carbon neutral housing? How can we make sure that that relationship with authorities is improved?
I can certainly come back to that with a couple of just thoughts on that, Chair. So and Councillor Bird, I think will certainly relate to this. We've had many conversations and discussions and a really powerful dialogue around this subject, both at the Council Land Delivery Board and at the Delivery Steering Group, which is the officer support group to that, which is represented by all local authorities in the Combined Authority. So there's definitely appetite there and understanding of the people who attend those sessions. I wonder whether there's potentially an element of us holding a broader session as part of the future home strategy development work, potentially with the review scrutiny committee as well, and representatives there, and maybe rather than it being a kind of combined authority hosted thing, we come to each local authorities, obviously subject to requests or approval of that, but we come and we have a kind of broader conversation with members and officers on a kind of more broad attendee list, so that we are talking to as many people as we can and there's a broad understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would certainly value some sort of initiative, because I can't speak for anybody else's local authority, but I am concerned if local authorities are not looking seriously at the opportunities that we've presented here, particularly given our housing crisis. So however that could be, moved forward, I would certainly endorse that. Councillor McCarthy?
Is there a clear plan for the West Midlands Combined Authority and recommendations to the local authorities to upskilling the officers within those authorities to be able to deal with this, and training and upskilling? Because otherwise you'd just be listening to what people say and saying, that sounds good.
Okay, I think there is another. From my point of view, and I know certainly the members of the task force from local authorities and the conversation with the task force, it's hope local authorities, there is a lot of understanding and a lot of knowledge about this subject matter across local authorities, so it's not unknown. It's just, I suppose, how do we mainstream it into all of the types of delivery? So it might not be a question of, I wouldn't want to claim to be upskilling local authority officers at all, but I do think there's probably a conversation there about how do we bring all of the elements together, rather than if we talk about in certain committees or certain boards, but not necessarily filtering through. So I think there's an opportunity to do that, and I'm sure we could learn as much from the on-the-ground delivery of some of these things that have happened in local authority areas as vice versa.
You mean a pilot in effect where many officers get the chance to observe?
Yeah, I think that would be useful. And I think, coming back to Councillor Bird's point around the visit to the cow factory, we could also go and visit a on-site scheme as well and go through some of that. That might be useful.
Do I have any other questions from members on this paper?
If I may, the thing that worries me about these modern construction is that we build so many houses all of the same design. And I think the end product, we need a bit of diversity in design, rather than make. If you went onto a military base years ago and you saw the Nissan huts, they were bog standard everywhere, and I think we've got to get away from that concept. We need diversity in design as well. But, we need variety in size, shape and form to give a community an identity, rather than a barrack block that is repeated time and time again. This is just the concept on it.
I think just on that point, I think there is, whilst I take the point, I think there is a wide range of delivery that's available, and it's mainly the internal elements of the building that would be built off-site. And then there are varieties of fascias or facades or various other elements of the external buildings that could be applied in different ways. And also, fair to say that different suppliers will focus on different types of delivery, so there will be different designs and different types of approaches to designs subject to the market that they're looking to work in, and also through the planning system being in keeping with the local area as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from anyone? No? Okay, so whilst we're asked to note this particular paper, I have picked up 4 points that I think are worthy of inclusion in the minutes. One is that the visit be organised and members of the committee who are able to attend do so. One is to encourage local authorities to be more proactive around the opportunities, and I think, you know, your suggestion of picking that up via the wider conversation, I think, you know, it would seem a sensible way forward to me if that's agreed by Housing and Land Board as well, because I do think we have to be moving our local authorities, and, you know, I'm sorry if other local authorities are moving at pace on this and Dudley is the only one that isn't, but nevertheless I think we do need to be more engaged in that, and the encouragement of the local supply chain and the increase in the local supply chain, just to endorse Councillor Bird's comments around that for the Housing and Land Board. So if those are accepted by people, we will include Councillor McCarthy.
We need to be clear about, we need to aim to drive a locally produced percentage of components, either by value or whatever.
Okay, we'll make that clear in the minutes. Thank you. Okay, then that moves us on to agenda item 8 and the affordable housing supply strategy update.
Thank you, Chair. So this is another update on development of the strategy through the Housing and Land Board's portfolio remit, following on from the Scrutiny Committee's review panel of affordable housing that was held in the last municipal year, and it's an update on the progress of that strategy since that time, and also a few notes on the next steps of that strategy. So as the report sets out under its purpose, this is very much intended as a collaborative and co-developed strategy across the region to bring together and build upon the existing great work that's done in terms of delivering affordable homes in the region, but also then to extend that and hopefully deliver even more. And how can the Combined Authority with its partners work together to kind of navigate that system, taking on board the recommendations of the Scrutiny review panel, and particularly the points around it being a very complex and multi-factor system. So how do we navigate some of that complexity? So in terms of the background, the Housing and Land Board commissioned this, and it very much fits in again with our overall objectives as set out in the Combined Authority's corporate plan and that review of the overview and scrutiny panel. Some of the background in the report sets out, particularly at the time of writing and continuing to develop, the need for affordable housing, both in the region and across the country as a whole, and the impacts of some of the economic effects in the country at the moment, particularly around the cost of living and other elements of that kind of economic background to this delivery. What we're very much looking to do, whilst co-developing this strategy with local authority partners and others, is to understand how we take this forward and how we deliver even more in the region, how we align that with the local authority strategies, so all local authorities will have their approach to affordable housing internally, and we're very much keen not to get in the way of that, but how do we help to enable some of that if we can, as we look for better funding, more funding, but also bringing together the various funding streams that are currently available in the region, and how do we facilitate and bring forward other investors into the region. So there's currently a huge amount of Homes England funding that's been allocated to registered providers. How do we ensure that as much of that is spent in the region as possible to deliver as many affordable homes as possible forward? So in terms of our work, we've currently We've recently set up a strategic partnership board with the local housing association partners. There's a third session of that next week, and there's a further mention of that in the next paper on today's agenda. But we're also on a kind of hopefully very fruitful engagement process at the moment with local authority partners, with Homes England, with housing associations. We've started to talk to a broader range of partners than ever before. So we had a link directly from a housing and land board member to the Arms House Association, and we've had really interesting conversations with them based on, and I certainly wasn't aware of this until we had this conversation, that Arms Houses are still being built around 500 every year. How do we look to help and support that more in the region in the future? So all of the different actors in this sector, how do we bring them together? So as I say, we're working very closely with all of our partners to develop this. One of the key things that we are setting out to do is how do we bring together a strategy that we can report against and come back to committees such as this on the development and the impact.
Yes.
How do we measure the delivery of actual outcomes in the region, so additional affordable homes? How can we as the Combined Authority, through our funding that we currently have and through our conversations with government as part of the devolution deal proposals, how can we secure more funding but also more flexibility for our current funding? So at the moment our housing and land development funds are very much focused on land remediation, which can play a big part in bringing forward more affordable homes, but it doesn't necessarily help us unlock more of those affordable homes. So how do we do that? Good example of that is quoted, but I think it is a really useful example of where the Combined Authority and the local authority work together on something very different to other projects. So that's the Help to Own project in Wolverhampton, which was 100 homes brought forward in a pilot scheme using equity funding from the Combined Authority that allows tenants to get to access those homes without a deposit up front. So it's a different type of affordability. It takes that requirement for an upfront deposit away. Those tenants can then choose, if they wish, to stay in the homes for 25 years. At the end of that term, they can purchase their home. And so it gives us a different opportunity to look at different products, and that's the type of flexibility we'd be looking for on a more consistent basis to be able to do those types of things. So this strategy is very much an overall umbrella for all of the approaches that we're looking to take. And if I may, Chair, I think a key point for today, if we could, is again, as you mentioned, in terms of the awareness raising in terms of the previous item, I think it would be really great if we could continue to develop those conversations through this committee with local authority officers and others. We could consistently talk to housing regeneration officers and various other officers in the region, or particular housing delivery teams and or housing revenue account teams and local authorities. If we can get the message out to them from this scrutiny committee as well, I think that would be really helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on getting the message out to local authorities. Vera?
The term affordable doesn't just mean social housing, it means buy to let and what have you. Now, we done a massive piece of work last year on this, and our findings were that the amount, I mean, it's only 20% of homes that are built that are actually forecast as being affordable, as being social rather than affordable. So as much as we would like people to be able to afford their own homes, they cannot. For reasons, you've got disabilities and so forth, those who can't go to work and other reasons. So this isn't really a Combined Authority thing, but something needs to be done so as we build more social housing for those that actually need it. I mean, in Walsall Housing Group have got 14,000 people waiting on their list to be rehoused. So I know there isn't anything or is there anything we can do to actually lobby the government to actually try and make it as the criteria changes, so as the funding changes, so as there's more social housing built?
Really, Chair, yeah, certainly, and I'll heartily agree with the comments around the review last year, which gave us a lot of in-depth information on the types of delivery and the types of affordability in the region. Social rent is prescribed by government in terms of where it can be delivered, and rents are available via housing in different parts of the country. Some of our local housing delivery, housing associations and others do continue to build social rented homes, but as you say, it's not as much as perhaps might expect in terms of the overall delivery. There are other types of affordabilities I've mentioned, and those are picked up in different areas. But I think the key thing for us as a combined authority to answer the question is lobbying the government on the rules and the flexibilities around what types of affordable homes we can bring forward. The delivery of social rent through local authorities and others, I know is a difficult situation, and is one that I think currently, as we stand, the best tool we have in our toolbox is to lobby government for changes to that legislation.
I've got Councillor McCarthy, followed by Councillor Tennant, and then Councillor Akhtar.
How do we ensure in doing this? Well, two things really. One is how to ensure a good mix between social housing and sold housing to give a good local society. And the second one is, how do we make sure, I mean, affordable is one of these things that you can have a housing that's quite affordable to buy and live in, but if you can't get to work at the hospital, or your kids can't get to the technical college or the school of your choice, it's no longer affordable, because then you're saddled with running a car, and we've got to allow a lot more parking space than we're going to have to going forward, and therefore less development.
Absolutely, Councillor. I think a couple of things. So the mix in terms of housing needs is very much based on local authority planning. So local authority planning teams will work on their assessments of both the housing need in their particular area, and therefore what mix should be developed in each of the schemes in their area. And our role is very much not to necessarily determine or distract that, but to help support that through our process if we can. So if we're having to invest into a scheme, we insist on local authority support for that scheme, so therefore it should meet the local authority requirements. I think that point around key workers is a key pardon the phrase, but and something that we've very much focused on in the devolution deal proposals is key worker housing at the moment isn't really clearly defined in terms of what it means and what the benefits of it could be, and how therefore you can incentivise key worker housing. So we're very much pushing for flexibility around that, and then that wider link to other types of affordability, so affordable travel and affordable connections into things and affordable childcare, etc. I think that's very much both, again, in terms of the local plan concepts for their areas is key to that. So there will be an assessment of radius for school catchment areas and those various other things, but also making sure that we align our transport and the infrastructure investments to make sure that there is public transport availability. There are things that help to connect these new developments into that wider system as well.
Right. The question's really based about what we as a combined authority can do in that area. And one of our key responsibilities is transport. Because the local authorities don't have anywhere near as much influence over that as we do. So what are we going to do about the transport part of it for these new developments to make them affordable? Because bus services are not exactly growing at the moment.
So the local transport plan is one of our key documents that we work very closely with TfWM on, making sure that we're aligning both our key areas for investment, so our key corridors, as we call them, or different types of areas, align with transport infrastructure investment and also existing accessibility. So that is a key point in terms of the fundamentals of things that we support as a combined authority, and then obviously it's building on that wider approach across the region in terms of making sure that we are able to provide access via both digital and transport.
You'll have a chance to pick that up again as well, Councillor McCarthy, because the LTP is coming to transport scrutiny on the 6th of February, so it'll give us an additional opportunity there with TfWM. Councillor Tennant.
I think this actually links quite nicely with Councillor McCarthy's question, but also the previous agenda item. So how much work has been done with partners to ensure that not only these houses are affordable to buy and move into, but then to live in and to run I speak of, I'm going through the process of buying my first home, but when I made the calculations, it wasn't just the cost of the mortgage, but also the additional bills and from moving out of shared accommodation and all of that sort of stuff. So how much work has been done with partners to make sure they have affordable to run.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. If you don't mind me saying so, and I think it's really important that we don't just look at affordability as affordability of the initial asking price or the initial rental price, whatever it might be. I think it's about the affordability to be able to live in those homes. That's not something we can necessarily prescribe or determine ourselves, but I think it's something that we work closely with local authority partners and others at the moment, and it's becoming more and more clear as the kind of cost of living agenda, it becomes more and more apparent in the region that there is more work to be done there. I think there are a few things around learning from some of the projects I mentioned earlier around the cost of running a home, and Councillor Bird referred to the cost of a particular scheme in terms of those living costs per week, and understanding how different types of delivering different types of homes can save money longer term, so that they don't just become affordable up front, but they become affordable to live in. I think it's a massive agenda, if I'm honest. I can't give a clear answer on all of those points, but I think that's something we're working to more and more, and something that becomes more and more apparent as we try and bring all of these different elements together. So it's not just about affordable in one area and then future homes in another, but how do we bring all of those factors together as an overall consistent strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. The term affordable in housing, it isn't affordable at these days, to be honest. Because the affordable mean is 80% of the private rent, and somebody lives in a deprived area or deprived neighborhood, and one person is earning in the family and is spending £800-900 on the rent. It's not affordable at all. And I think it's misleading, and it's a pity that the governments and the council and the housing association are moving away from the social housing, and more we've seen in affordable. And when I was sitting on the planning committee, I've seen whenever a major planning application comes to the council, for example, in Coventry, 25% of the development will require a social affordable. What they do is maybe 12% or 13% affordable house are the house, but the social element of it, they may build a block of flat on the corner of that development. And we don't need that. We need the housing for the family. And I think as a combined authority, we should push for that. And whenever we spend our money or give a grant to someone, we should put some condition that this money should be used to build houses, not a flat. We need a social houses, not a flat.
Can I just bring Councillor Burnley on that, and then I'll bring Rob in.
So I apologise, I had to go out. We've got a major fire in Warsaw. So there we are. I think it's unfair to say that we aren't doing as much as we can. I mean, there's a scheme which we put into place in Wolverhampton, sadly. It was the first scheme we did, called Help to Own. And basically, that is directed towards what Councillor Akhtar says. When people can afford rent, but they can't get the mortgage. So basically, we give them backing from our partners to enable them to move into a house without a deposit, and they are paying exactly what they would have paid in rent, but shortly over that, they put some of that into a separate deposit account, so they're building up that deposit, and eventually the house becomes theirs. Now, it took me probably 3 years to convince the officers here that that was a good scheme. Sue Summers certainly fought hard, but the scheme was oversubscribed in Wolverhampton. A lot of those people were people who worked at the hospital, for instance, who were not on the best of wages, as we all know from local press reports. But it has been a fantastic success, and we need to do more of that. Councillor Akhtar's right. What's affordable in Warsaw is different to what's affordable in Stratford-on-Avon. We do our utmost to try and insist upon developers that the terms of our grant do have strings attached, but it comes back to the local planning authority, and that's where we have to make the difference. If you go to Lichfield, for instance, they do specify with planning application coming forward, they have areas where they will only accept 2 and 3 bedroom properties and not flats. And I think that's where we have to make the difference through the planning process.
Rob, is there anything you want to add?
I just to concur in terms of basically the opposite, wider how that all fits together. I think there's an element there that's the local planning authority responsibility, and it will be something that combined authority would basically determine. But we do, as Councillor said, we do have our criteria within our funding approval, so that there is a minimum of 20% affordable homes on anything that we invest in, and that we are looking to do various pilot schemes, of which the next agenda item is one that is looking to demonstrate how we can deliver differently. So help to house, for example, we're working towards another example, subject to approval, that hopefully will give us a broader reach and a broader impact on this agenda, whilst obviously still working very much within the confines of what both legislation and other things kind of restrict us to, unfortunately.
Any questions from anybody else? I mean, I would just like to sort of comment that, you know, I think it's really picking up Councillor Akhtar's points and Councillor Waters' points around the numbers, the percentage of affordable housing, and I remain extremely disappointed in the relationships between developers, local authorities and the combined authority over this. I mean, we've got a new outline planning application going in for a development in Kings Winford on an old quarry site, which is, I think, 630 or 650 properties, not one is going to be affordable. And that really concerns me when we're talking about significant, large developments, that mix of tenure isn't there. And whilst I absolutely agree and understand about the relationship with your local planning committee, about how you influence that and the decisions the local planning committee can take, you know, it's about that kind of circular relationship for me, and I feel that has to improve with developers as well. Any other comments from anybody else? So the additional kind of notes I've picked up on that are around the genuine affordability, that the whole picture of affordability, and not just the affordability of the actual rent or the mortgage, but the running costs and the locational costs of that affordability. And again, the relationship with local authorities. Is there anything else that anybody feels needs to be added into that? That's the bird.
Well, Chairman, you indicated that you're scrutinising the local transport plan in a few weeks. For those who don't know, I'm a car addict, in as much that the local transport plans, not just here but across the country, seem to be focused on a bus and nothing else. If you're not on a bus or you're not pedaling a cycle, then you're an anathema in the UK. A lot of people still use cars, and unfortunately we seem to ignore that. And I think that needs to be put in, because it links into this. Because some of the schemes that are coming forward, like the one you mentioned, some people will rely upon a car rather than being able to get to a bus. And I just hope that this Scrutiny committee will take that on board when you're looking at the LTP.
Yeah, it's a fair point, because, you know, if you're talking about a development of 650 odd properties, you can expect to have at least 1,300 additional cars, can't you? Yeah. And it is about your local infrastructure to manage that. Councillor Waters and then Councillor McCarthy.
With public transport, it's all about reliability and it going to the places that people want to go to. And if the public transport is not going to the places people need to get, if it's unreliable, people are going to use the cars anyway, and it's more convenience than anything else to use the cars. I myself, I can't drive, so I have to use public transport.
Yeah, it's a fair point, Vera, and you know, I know you're a great champion of that on our Transport Scrutiny Committee. Ian, did you want to make? Had you got your light on?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Bird entirely in that. In the last 40 years, whether you like it or not, car ownership has gone up significantly. Yeah, we've got something like 40 million cars on the road, and people have voted with their feet away from conurbations away from public transport. I didn't come here this morning on the train because I didn't trust it. And you and I had an experience a few weeks ago where I had to go back home and find the car and find my way here. Although I wanted to come on the train, I no longer trusted it. So the concept that you can only use the roads if you make it awkward for the driver or you tax them to hell is ridiculous, in that a huge amount of economic activity and the efficiency of labour, the mobility of labour, comes down to car ownership.
Sorry,
So-
Madam Chairman, I've moved
You
on
have-
committee somewhere you shouldn't go. perhaps.
No, before let's take it into consideration that very often the model for London, which has got an unusual transport system as far as the country is concerned, the model for London just doesn't apply elsewhere outside of London.
Sure.
And we've got to stop penalising someone for being economically mobile, economically active, and actually put the mobility of labour into the equation where skills and knowledge goes where it is required. And all of a sudden, you change the whole argument about car ownership. So we must allow for parking near a property, easy access to parking near employment. And years ago, there was a wonderful experiment down at Redditch. Anyone from Redditch will tell you can live in parts of Redditch where you don't need a car, you can walk everywhere. But economically, it was a disaster in that it was isolated. The economic infrastructure to keep a good quality of life in that environment just wasn't there. And for 40 years, people struggle down there economically to make a living. It was a wonderful place to live in if you could make a living. So, we've got to be careful we don't create monsters.
Yeah, and you will recall, Councillor Kettle, that when we did the scrutiny work on the Trailblazer devolution deal, that we did raise some concerns around the additional powers that the Combined Authority was seeking to obtain around various enforcement for cars. So we'll see where that's at when we have a fuller presentation on the deal that comes back from government. But yeah, we certainly raised our concerns about that. Final point from Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, for a lot of these newer developments, as they increasingly use land near to places like railways, and railways are noisy inconvenience, the nearest station is 4 or 5 miles away. Can't we look at, and that line might be just used for freight or something like that, can't we look at multiplexing some of that use a bit more and opening these rail arteries up to people to be able to get to work?
Again, I think that's something that you need to discuss through transport, and I know you'll certainly have some support on that from various members of the public. So we'll keep that with transport. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 9 and Rob, affordable housing delivery pilot.
Thank you, Chair, and this does follow on from that previous conversation that we've just had. So this is an update on the development programs with a group of housing associations in the region that have been ongoing for some time now, in terms of a variety of proposals that have been brought forward and developed and tested out in terms of a pilot scheme for more affordable delivery in the region. The housing association partners are grouped under an umbrella group known as the West Midlands Housing Association Partnership, or WMHAP for short in the paper. And since 2018 onwards, they've been in consistent engagement with the Combined Authority. They also have a membership of our Housing Land Delivery Board. They've got a representative on that board from the sector, and we work very closely with that umbrella organisation to understand and work closely with the housing associations in the region on both their development proposals, but also the wider impacts on the sector. So at next week's partnership board meeting, we've got agenda items looking at both skills and zero carbon. So following up from the previous conversation in terms of the zero carbon agenda that housing associations are looking at the moment, and also their skills development. But alongside that wider kind of engagement process, we've also been working with the partners on specific proposals for for the pilot that's set out in this paper. In effect, we are now at a appraisal stage of an initial proposal from the partnership that's now made up of 5 of the biggest registered providers in the region, and they're listed in the paper under 2.5. But just Watford, Citizen, Greensware Accord has been mentioned, Midland Heart and WHG from the Walsall Housing Group. And those 5 RPs are collaborating on a joint approach to the Combined Authority, where they're looking to acquire land from ourselves in order to be able to develop 100% affordable homes on specific schemes. The initial process is now being undergone, and we're working through kind of due diligence on both their expectations for these sites and also what that would look like compared to standard market delivery. So what would a standard disposal of these sites or sale of these sites to a market developer provide in the region, and compared to what might this partnership bring forward? And we're in the appraisal stages of that at this point. But just to say that there is very firm commitment and a very strong line that we've taken throughout this process, that there are clear kind of parameters for what we would look to achieve, and they're listed under 3.3, which is 100% affordable housing. So not just 20% that we currently have through our existing criteria, but 100% affordable of the mix that RPs might look to deliver. All of the Combined Authority's aims and objectives being delivered on the ground, so approaches to zero carbon. They are looking to establish modern methods of construction, and in conversations with locale in terms of that factory that you mentioned already. There would be an emphasis on key worker homes where appropriate, and that it would also look to deliver different types of models and bring in maximise investment in the region. So those are our kind of clear lines in terms of our engagement with them. It's clear to say, and I really must emphasise this, none of this has been through any approval for formal decision at this stage. It's very much exploratory discussions, and that any actual subject to that appraisal work being completed, any approvals would be subject to the normal due diligence process, the usual reports through to investment board and the usual caveats there. But we are very keen to continue to develop this proposal because it does clearly seem to address some of the issues, albeit on a pilot scheme or schemes that we've been talking about already this morning in the region. And it's very clear that we can potentially learn more from doing something along these lines to develop more in future, subject similar to the Help to Own scheme, which has given us a lot of evidence of pilot delivery. It can then show us potentially the ways forward for us to be able to deliver more, bringing together both registered providers, Homes England funding, Combined Authority influence and involvement, and working closely with the local authorities on their local plan requirements as well.
Right, so do I have any questions from committee on this paper? Councillor Sutherland?
Thank you. And it's very commendable, Rob, to be bringing this pilot. Well, the questions I've got in my mind are, what sort of scale are we anticipating at this stage?
So at this stage, Sharon, I have to be clear here that this is commercially sensitive information in terms of any further information. So I'll just give you the kind of vague outlines. We're looking at circa 100 homes at this point as part of this initial pilot process. That's yet to be agreed in terms of the exact numbers, but that's circa 100 homes in that first instance, with obviously the ambition subject to approvals and subject to successful delivery of building a bigger pipeline in the future of these types of schemes.
It's what I call good practice that we pass throughout the region, if I'm honest. I mean, I don't want to go back on previous discussions, but the current planning laws just need redoing. We have, regrettably, we have a housing estates now where there are 400 or 500 homes with limited access to them. So we get traffic jams on a housing estate. Work that one out at key times. Not only that, the house specifications comply with the current legislation of 1.4 cars per home, and these are individual houses, not flats. And regrettably, on account, an audit count, the average is just short of 3. So you can imagine all the streets are just full of parked cars. So I think we, on these, and I'm delighted that this is, I will, through you lot, take this back to CANIC and ask them to at least observe and get close to you to this project so that we understand a lot more. Because land is expensive, land is short, we're very short in CANIC, but demand is high. So how do you balance all this out? Where do we get the money to be able to do it? No one sells you cheap land on the cheap. So if you haven't got land and you have to go to the commercial market, you're kind of caught. So I think it's a great initiative. Goes without saying, I wish you well, and I would like, certainly from CANIC's point of view, to be aware of your outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, we're very happy to talk to colleagues and chairs about that.
I'm not sure whether you're in a position to say, given the fact that you said it was commercially sensitive, but you said delivery of circa 100. Is that on top of or including the Wolverhampton model?
Yeah, so to be absolutely clear, this is separate to the Wolverhampton
Okay,
scheme.
fine,
So
okay.
100 new units subjected. So I'll keep saying that just
Yeah.
to make sure we don't get ahead of ourselves, but it is subject to approval. It'll be 100 new homes, completely separate to the Wolverhampton scheme that's already been developed.
Thanks. Councillor Tennant.
So you've listed 5 partners here. Are those kind of the people you're just in discussion with, and you'll be proceeding with one, or will they each be taking, say, a 5th? Will it be over one site or multiple sites?
Okay, so the 5 registered providers noted in the report are working together as a partnership, so they're bringing together this proposal as a collective. How they will then develop the scheme, or who will take the sites, the units at the end of the site delivery is to be determined, but it will be in conversation with ourselves and the local authority in terms of whether that housing association is either in existence in that local area or has had links and that type of thing, so it won't be imposed. In terms of their combination and how they're working together, so this proposal originally came from the whole partnership, so it is backed by the whole partnership with 20+ housing associations. But the 5 listed in the report are the 5 who have, in effect, signed up to be part of the initial pilot. Now, that doesn't preclude others joining in the future, but it's just those 5 who are looking to invest in the first examples, again, subject to approval being made at that point. So they are the kind of leaders within the group, but that doesn't mean there won't be others joining in the future. And we've deliberately kept the potential agreement open-ended for both other local other housing associations to join, but also other public agencies to be able to join in the future. So if other public agencies have land that they want to develop through this type of mechanism, that opportunity should be there in the future.
Councillor Waters.
So along the lines of this now, we need to be concentrating on brownfield and not greenbelt. Now in Warsaw, we have got a lot of greenbelt, and I actually welcome the fact that we have not got the Black Country Plan now, because the majority of the homes that wanted to be built was going to be built on our greenbelt. So builders need to be, and housing associations, whoever's building the properties, need to be concentrating on brownfield. I'm aware it takes a lot more groundwork to actually get that land back into what's the name, but once we've lost our greenbelt, it's gone.
Just briefly, Chair, this pilot, as with all of our projects, is absolutely brownfield first approach, and conversations with housing associations are very much focused on these will be brownfield opportunities in the future if that's where we head towards, and that generally tends to be their focus anyway in terms of these types of organisations, but that remains absolutely fundamental for us as co-op.
Councillor Bird.
Just building on what Vera's just said, and Rob, I mean, there are initiatives coming forward from the development sector. Only recently on the investment board, we had a scheme came to us from a company in Hungary, I think, in the Jewellery Quarter, which is a redundant factory, which they were converted into habitable residential accommodation, and they came to us for support. It was the first one in the UK, as far as I'm aware, and that gained approval from the investment board, and obviously we're keeping our eyes onto how that will work. And they're obviously their marketing, their model has worked elsewhere. So yes, brownfield is where we come in as a housing and land board. Really, we actually fill the viability gap for those developers who find that when you put a spade in the ground in the Black Country, you never know when it comes out whether you're going to have anything on the end of the scale, because the contamination is so bad. Having said that, that's exactly where we fit in. The land is cost X, the cleanup cost is this, which is what our brownfield land investment fund is used for. And the more we can get those houses built, the more we can make our case to government to say, look, you said you give us the money to do this, and I have to say the Housing and Land Board, and I don't take the credit for this, it's the officers that actually do it, has been probably one of the most successful in the UK. And as a result, the government have recognised that. And whenever we go knocking on the door with our begging bowl, we can say, look, we asked you for this money, and we said we do this, and we've done it. And so therefore, where's your argument to say you won't give us some more? So that's where we are. And I think that credit to the Combined Authority in that respect, it has been very successful.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. If you can just outline, so the plans in terms of land that is going to be disposed of, can you just outline where the member oversight of the disposal of that public asset will be, please?
So the investment decision or the decision to dispose of land will be taken through investment board. So there would be the necessary usual due diligence up to that point and work through all of the various options, and then a recommendation will be taken to the investment board in terms of how that land is then disposed of. Now this is, as I understand it, the first time the Combined Authority has looked to do something along these lines, so we're working through all the various government procedures in terms of doing that, but it will very much be a clear and transparent process for that decision.
It might be that this committee, if you do a further update to us in years, that the outline of that governance process is included as part of that update, please.
Okay, to do that, Chair. I think again, just coming back to the point of this being a pilot, I think that's one of the key bits of learning for us as an organisation, as well as how do we look to understand the lessons that we've learned up to this point already, but then also in future in terms of transparency and oversight and efficiency of getting these types of proposals through the machine once the machine is kind of settled to deal.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments, Councillor Gethin?
Yeah, thank you. Looking at what you've put there, the only thing that stands out to me when you're looking at pilot for more housing is you're looking at putting 100 more houses in. So nothing there states the impact that that will have on schools or health. So what doctor's surgery would they fall under? Can that doctor's surgery take on? Furthermore, if there's 2 people in that house, for instance, that's 200 people that then need to attend that surgery. What hospital would they fall under? What NHS trust? Again, it's the wider impact, because there's stuff in here on transport, but nothing on actually the affordability on schools and health.
Good point, thank you. And it's worth just flagging that all of these proposals will be worked through with the local planning authorities involved. So those decisions around schools, education, health provision, etc., will all be factored into the local planning process for local planning agreement or through the planning committee as these proposals go forward. So it's not something that we would necessarily determine ourselves as Combined Authority, but it will be done in conjunction with and purely, at the kind of decision-making basis of the local authority. So that nothing will be brought forward without local authority consent. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Nothing from anyone else? Okay, so thank you very much, Rob, for presenting those papers. We were asked on the final paper to welcome, endorse and note the progress, and I think from what I've heard of comments from people, I think that's absolutely the case. But what we would like is further updates as we move through the pilot on how that's progressing. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Bird, for coming in this morning. I know you've got your current challenges in this incident in Warsaw.
That's are in my group.
Yeah. Well, I'm not included, am
No,
I?
no. You're one of the good guys.
So thanks very much.
Thank
for your
you very much.
attendance,
Thank you all.
and thank you, Rob. Thanks. Okay, we welcome, just before we I'll move on to Linda, but just before I do, just want to welcome Laura to the meeting. So Linda.
Thank you. So you have in front of you the standard grant register which we bring to your meetings. This is for it shows a list of the current live grants where the Combined Authority is the accountable body. So you have a full list attached to the appendix, and as it sets out in 2.2, we have had 3 additions since you last saw this grant around bus service improvement plan, Multiply UK SPF, and a social housing decarbonisation fund. So it's a standard report just for transparency and visibility of all live grants that we've got coming in. But I'm happy to take any questions anybody might have.
Then if you've got any questions of Linda on the grant register. No, I've just got one, Linda, and that's on 2.2, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 1. At some point, would it be possible for us to have some statistical information on take up of that? Yeah. Local and perhaps based on local authority which local authorities have taken it up, and any criteria attached to that that's been prohibitive.
Absolutely, we can do that, and obviously through Lindsay we decide whether you want just the information sharing or whether you want a specific session in a future agenda. All right, brilliant.
I mean, we do have I think it's the next scrutiny meeting, isn't it, where we're looking at the Combined Authority's progress on carbon neutral for 2041. So it might be appropriate for it to come into that if you've got enough detail on it at that moment.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you. Okay, so moving us on, we have the minutes from Transport Scrutiny Subcommittee. As we are not core today, we can't approve those. They will have to go to board for approval. Just a point actually on those minutes, it does say the date of the next meeting is this afternoon at 12. That meeting has been put back, as members of the committee will know, until the beginning of February due to availability of finalised reports from officers and the approval process they need to go through. So that takes us on to the overview and scrutiny work programme, and that just outlines the items that we have coming forward on the 13th of March. I would like to just add into that, if we could have just a short time during that, at the end of that meeting, for members to have a think about future scrutiny. Now, whilst the membership of this committee may change next year, as is often the way, I don't think it hurts to think about our annual report and the types of recommendations that we may think may need to go into that in terms of improving how we conduct scrutiny within the Combined Authority. Vera?
Could we look at education? I know we're supposed to be doing some kind of workshop on it because they're actually just starting to put together regarding courses for 18 upwards and so forth. Can we actually have a look at that to see what the progress with that, what's going on with it now? Because they came to one meeting and spoke to us about it.
Yeah, I'm sure absolutely we can pick that up in the work programme for next year. But I'm thinking probably more for that particular session I wanted to look at in terms of how we conduct scrutiny. Is there anything that we can do differently or we need to think about differently to make scrutiny a more effective process going forward? And that might be something that we can include in the annual report for acceptance by the CAAGA. But we'll pick that up at the next meeting. And then finally, the West Midlands Combined Authority forward plan is there for noting. If I could ask Laura at this point just to comment, because it is on the forward plan around the Trailblazer devolution deal, and we did pick it up in terms of matters arising from one of our minutes. So if we could have an update on where negotiations are at, please.
Yes, with pleasure. So it's been I think it's been a slower process than either ourselves or Manchester would have thought. We initially were talking about trying to finish a Devo deal in 2022. Obviously, it is now 2023, and we have not finalized that deal. However, there was a meeting yesterday between our high-level negotiation group and the Minister, Dahenia Davidson, who's got the responsibility for levelling up. That group is the mayor and the deputy mayor, the leader of Wolverhampton City Council, Ian Brookfield, and the deputy leader of Birmingham City Council, Bridget Jones. And there was a meeting yesterday that took place that was very productive. So going over some of, I think, what are the major priorities that we are seeking, which we don't yet have sufficient draft text to share with leaders, but the conversations are mostly focused on fiscal devolution and giving the region powers to take on new fiscal responsibilities. I'm going to call them leveling up zones. I don't want these to be confused with the government's policy on investment zones. They're quite different. And again, through the Housing and Land Board and through the finance directors, work is being done to look at what are our priorities, spatial priorities for zones where we would like to see additional investment in a combination of housing and transport and education and skills and green energy. So some of those zones have been discussed at board. Again, there's nothing, we've had no text back, and there's nothing in writing that is something that's really sort of eminently shareable, but getting those priorities, priority zones for investment is hugely important. We have bigger ambitions around further devolution of skills and careers advice, and that is another priority for the region. There are some asks we've made around trade and investment, and giving more ability to lead in the region on trade and investment, and housing. So again, further funding for brownfields land, which I think will be welcome given the conversations we've just had, and affordable. So at a very high level, those are sort of our priorities. We are sat here today hoping that we will make some real progress on some of those. Those things make it a trailblazing deal if we can get some of those big things. There's lots of other discussions being had on other smaller priorities, perhaps, which are maybe less than trailblazing. And it will be for the leaders to look at what kind of text government can work with us on to decide whether or not that is a deal that they think is one that they want to progress and accept. And again, depending upon what is in that deal, that may or may not need to go through constituent authorities, cabinets. That really will depend on what is genuinely on offer. I can't answer today what that looks like. Hoping really, I think, in sort of the next 2 months to get to a place where we've got more clarity and perhaps a principal approval from the board to progress with the deal, but we are not there yet. So I hope that helps, Chair. I can try to take any questions. Appreciate it's not as straightforward, but I think as ever, starting with a series of regional asks and then into government for their response and trying to get to some sort of a agreed set of text that we can work through is definitely the next step, but we're not there quite yet.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Laura. And I think, obviously, as a scrutiny committee, we did a lot of work going back into the summer of last year because it was quite a time schedule at that point. It was expected to go into the autumn statement and a decision be given, and we all know the changes that have occurred. But I think, obviously, our scrutiny process was around what was included in that original deal. Are you and things might be dropped from it, but are you expecting anything new to be added into it that we would need to take a view on?
Not at the moment. The broad themes remain the same. Some of the detail within it might change. But in terms of sort of getting Devo ready and the work that this committee did on shaping that document, that remains the basis of the conversations that we are having.
Do you have any questions from anybody else? No? Okay, thanks ever so much for that update, Laura, very helpful. Okay, so we move on. We don't have any members of the public or the press in the room, so we will move on to item number 14, and this is not the pre